In this lecture, I'm going to introduce some principles and basics of vegetation remote sensing, which means that we use remote sensing to address vegetation-related issues in real world. Okay, so let's get started. Firstly, I'm going to introduce leaf reflectance first. Okay, after this whole semester's learning, I think you should be kind of familiar with that reflectance spectrum of healthy vegetation, right? That very famous reflectance peak that is happening at near infrared band of vegetation's reflectance spectrum, right? And there is very low reflectance around the red band, and suddenly there is a huge leap of reflectance, and the reflectance of near infrared band is very high for healthy vegetation. So that's a spectrum you might be very familiar with right now, but I want to just go deep a little bit, go deeper a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to talk about temporal characteristics of vegetation, because different crops, different types of vegetation, they have different life cycles, and their reflectance spectrum changes by time due to different life cycles. So when we're talking about vegetation remote sensing, time is always important, or more specifically, seasonal effect is very important. When you're looking at the same vegetation at different, within different seasons, at different seasons of a year, you will get different, you will probably most likely get different conclusions and results. Okay, and the vegetation indices, you might be very familiar with NDVI already. I will introduce several other commonly used, not very complex indices to address vegetation. And at the end, I'm going to introduce US government funded scientific, say, research or scientific project related to vegetation remote sensing. It's called GAP. Okay, gap analysis and biodiversity. It's not only about vegetation, but vegetation is very important in GAP. Okay, so firstly, leaf reflectors. Okay, so this solid black curve here is the reflectance spectrum of healthy leaf or healthy vegetation I mentioned before, right? So this part, let me use a mark pen. So this is the very famous near infrared reflectance peak of vegetation, right? And besides this spectrum of vegetation, let me erase this first. We also have some other information here. So this gray part here, right? Very long one. Another, let's just say plume. It's like several peaks here, but it's not, they're not peaks. They're addressing the absorption effect of water. So if here, say, we have a very strong water absorption area for water. That's the reason why this shaded area is very large. We know that water is there in every type of life, right? And water is also very important to the reflectance characteristics of healthy vegetation. Not only healthy vegetation, even unhealthy vegetation. There is always water in leaves. So if the absorption effect of water is very strong within a specific area of EMR spectrum, you can see that the reflectance of leaf will drop dramatically because water is absorbing energy there. So the reflectance is weaker. Similar here, right? So here within this shaded area, we have very strong water absorption around this area of the spectrum. So yeah, accordingly, the reflectance of the leaf dropped a lot because water is absorbing energy within that band, within this area, okay? And let's get back to the leaf. So there are dominant factors controlling leaf reflectance, including leaf pigments in the palisade of a leaf, okay? Also, within mesophile of a leaf, there are chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B, and there are other contents in the leaf. Together, they affect the reflectance spectrum of a leaf of vegetation, and together they formed this reflectance spectrum. Of course, you should also consider water, and a leaf can be very thin, but the structure inside structure of a leaf can be very complex. On the right side, I have two figures showing you different, say, components of a leaf. This part is about biology. You don't have to memorize anything, but at least you should know the general structure of a leaf, because all those components, water, pigments, chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, and other pigments, they are in mesophile of leaves. So they all affect the reflectance spectrum of a leaf. So at least you should know in general what they are in every leaf. Okay. So this is a chlorophyll absorption bands, blue and red. In these two bands, chlorophyll A and B, they absorb a lot of energy. So the reflectance is not that strong for leaves. And in green, you can see that there is a reflectance small peak here, because chlorophyll A and B, they do not absorb so much green light. Instead of that, they reflect green visible light. That's the reason why most vegetation on this planet, they are green, okay? That's because chlorophyll A and B, they reflect green light. And here, let's talk about the reflectance characteristic of vegetation within different bands. So invisible bands, okay, chlorophyll A and B, they have different absorption efficiency. Okay, so this thinner curve here is the absorption spectrum of chlorophyll A. Be careful here. What I'm showing you here, okay, we have two curves here, right? A thinner one and a thicker one. They are absorption spectrum. They are not reflectance spectrum. If we're talking about the reflectance spectrum and the absorption spectrum of the same object, these two spectra, they are complementary to each other, because the stronger the absorption, the weaker the reflectance, okay? So here is absorption efficiency or absorption spectrum. So you can say chlorophyll A and B, they actually have different absorption efficiency, but they are very similar to each other in terms of their shapes. Okay, around the blue band, they have very high absorption efficiency, which means that both of them absorb a lot of blue light and even violet. It's not a part of visible light, but it's very close to blue light. And both of them do not like green light. They do not absorb green light. So that's the reason why we have very low efficiency for absorption, okay, for both A and B. And there is this very obvious absorption peak around red band, okay, for A and B. And after that, you can say the absorption efficiency is low again for both A and B. Here is one near infrared comes in, okay? We know that there is a huge reflectance peak for vegetation. That's mainly because chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B, they do not absorb near infrared energy. That's the reason why the reflectance is very strong. Okay, so within visible area, or can say within visible range of the of EMR spectrum, chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B, they are what? They're crucial. They are dominant factors for the reflectance or absorption characteristics of vegetation. And then near infrared, vegetation has very high reflectance within near infrared band. Leaf reflects about 40 to 60% of incident energy from the spongy mesophile. Okay, and chlorophyll A and B, they are pigments in spongy mesophile. Okay, the remaining 45 to 50% of the energy penetrates through the leaf. And here is this figure is showing you the relationship between transmittance, not between, among transmittance, absorption, and reflectance of vegetation at different bands. So you can see here from 0.4 to 0.7. Let me draw something here. From 0.4 to 0.7. That's visible band, right? You can see here, absorption here is the most dominant, say, effect of vegetation. So, which means that vegetation absorbs most energy within visible band. Reflectance is there because we can say vegetation is green, but it's not strong. So most energy here is absorbed. And after that, from near infrared and go on to the right, reflectance is dominant. Okay. Transmittance is also dominant. Because a lot of light, of course, not visible light, they are penetrating leaves, and absorption here is very weak. Okay, but when we're talking about near infrared, which is right here, the reflectance peak here again is very famous. Okay, it is the start of strong reflectance of vegetation. Okay, let's go on. So mid-infrared, within mid-infrared band, water is the dominant factor. So let's just check this figure again. We have two curtains here, right? Here, the shaded area is a big curtain. Let's just call it a curtain. Looks like a curtain. And here we have another curtain here. Okay, so the longer the shaded area, the stronger the absorption effect of water around that specific band. So you can see here, 1.45 right here, 1.94 somewhere here, right? 2.7 is actually to the right of the figure, but you can see here, we have another long shaded area here. So within this area, within mid-infrared band, so water is the dominant factor who seriously affects the absorption or reflectance characteristic of leaves. Okay, wherever there is strong absorption from water, the reflectance is low. And here another peak for water absorption, and again very low reflectance of vegetation. The third one here, Similarly, because the absorption effect from water within a leaf is very strong, so the reflectance of the leaf is very low. Okay, so you can say that within visible band, chlorophyll A and B, they are dominant factors for leaf reflectance. And within near infrared, I would say that chlorophyll A and B, they are still dominant factors for leaf reflectance because they do not absorb infrared energy anymore. That's the reason why there is this huge, where is my cursor? There is this huge leap of reflectance, right? And after that, when we're going into mid-infrared band, water is here to play the most important role because from middle infrared band, water begins to absorb a lot of energy. That's the reason why when we're talking about water body in near infrared and mid infrared image, these water bodies, they're usually in dark tone because they're dark to these bands because they just absorb, water just absorbs so much energy, okay, from near infrared band. Not that much compared to mid infrared band, but still water begins to absorb energy. And especially in mid infrared band, okay, water is very dark because it just absorbs too much energy. Okay, so now we know why. Let's just erase this drawings first. Now we know why this reflectance curve of vegetation is this shape. Let's focus on this solid black reflectance curve of vegetation. So within near infrared band, it's the result of chlorophyll A and B. And after that, within near infrared band, again, it's about chlorophyll absorption. They do not absorb so much energy from infrared band. So there is this reflectance peak. And after that, when we are going into mid-infrared band, this time water is the main character because water begins to absorb so much energy. So there is this reflectance, say, valley. Okay, reflectance valley 1, reflectance valley 2, reflectance valley 3. We call it valley because it's the opposite of a peak, right? So visible light, near infrared light, and or energy, or mid infrared energy. Within these three bands, within these three areas, vegetation or leaf shows different reflectance characteristics. And these characteristics, they are determined by different components within a leaf. Chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, and water, they are crucial. Okay? Okay. Talking about the importance of water, let's see some comparison here. So relative water content of Mongolia grandiflora. Okay, it's a very commonly seen vegetation in North America. Not very common back in Asia. I'm not sure, but yeah, let's just say. So we have several reflectance spectra for the same plant, this very beautiful flower. Within this figure, why several? Because each one represents a reflectance spectrum for a specific percentage of water content. So the highest one, the dash dot spectrum, dash dot, is for the vegetation when it has only 5% water content. So you can say it's the highest one. The reflectance is the highest if you compare this spectrum to other spectra, because the water content is the lowest. The absorption of water is the weakest here. So it has the highest reflectance. And you can see that when the water content increases from 5% to 25% to 50 to 75 to 100, which is very extreme, the reflectance within all bands, within this whole spectrum, decreases dramatically from 5% to 25% to 50% to 75% to 100%. Okay, so you can see that when we're talking about vegetation, when we compare the spectra from different vegetation, even spectra from the same vegetation with different water content, we should be very careful, because sometimes you want to make sure that before comparing any two spectra from two plants, you need to make sure that these two plants, they generally have the similar percentage of water content. Then you can compare their reflected spectra, because water content can considerably affects what? The reflectance of vegetation within the whole spectrum of EMR, from visible light to mid-infrared. Okay, so here is just an example to show you that addressing water content, percentage relative water content, is important when we compare vegetation spectrum, reflectance, vegetation reflectance spectrum. Okay, and here are some more examples showing you that even for the same leaf, the reflectance of that leaf could change due to different factors, right? So here we have a leaf maybe in summer, in early autumn, and late autumn. They have different colors for sure. So you can imagine, you can expect that they are reflectance spectra are different from each other. Okay, red leaf, green leaf, yellow leaf, brown leaf. Of course, these four leaves, they are from different parts of the life cycle. Okay, and on the right side, okay, some more example. A green leaf, a leaf with different colors, right? Another leaf, you can say this green leaf is marked by 1. So this spectrum 1 is for that leaf. And for the second leaf, we have spectrum 2 and 3, right? Even on the same leaf, if it is not healthy, a part of the leaf is not healthy, and the other part of the leaf for now is still healthy. If you collect reflectance spectra from different parts of a leaf, of the same leaf, you could have different results. Spectrum 2 and 3, they are from the same leaf and they have different shapes. Okay, and leaf C is right here. It's not that healthy. Maybe it's sick. Maybe it's just dying. But spectrum 4 is for that brown leaf. So you can say that very familiar reflectance spectrum of vegetation is just the perfect and ideal spectrum for vegetation. When you're carrying out a research, you're doing an experiment, you're doing a work, and you're trying to use remote sensing to address vegetation, you will face different types of different reflectance spectra in terms of their shapes, in terms of a lot of other factors. So it's very complex. So that familiar one is the most straightforward one, ideal one, and you are not necessarily going to say it in your future research when you or work when you are addressing vegetation-related issues. Okay, leaves color, leaves health, a lot of other factors could affect. the reflectance spectra of leaves. Okay, and the next thing I want to talk a little bit is something called multiple scattering. Okay, in real world, let's just make this even more complex. And in real world, when we're talking about vegetation, when we're talking about especially a tree, there is canopy, which means that there are multiple leaves existing within very limited space, within the space of canopy. And they're covering each other, right? Which means that, okay, when the light, let's just focus on this largest arrow here. When the light arrives at the first leaf, let's just assume reflectance is 50%. 50% of the energy will just return to the sky. The rest 50% will penetrate, which means the transmission of the energy is 0.5. The rest half of the energy will penetrate the first leaf and arrives at the second leaf. And a similar process will happen again on the second leaf, which means that half of the original energy will be reflected by the second leaf, and half of that, again, will be what? Penetrating the second leaf. So you can say these arrows, there is reflectance, there is transmission, and this is just complex enough, right? So R1 is half of the original energy. That's the reflectance for the original energy, right? T1 is the transmittance of the original energy, which is half of that. And R2 is for the reflectance of the second leaf. And that energy will what? Penetrate the first leaf. That's half of that energy. And half of that energy will still be reflected by the other side of the first leaf. That's again half of that. So you can say that's only 2 leaves. So there could be hundreds or even thousands of leaves within a tree canopy if that's a very huge tree. So you can see that the specific transmittance and reflectance of EMR within tree canopy can be very complex. That's the reason why a lot of scholars in remote sensing, they are trying to use very accurate models to address this very delicate, complex process of reflectance and transmittance of EMR within vegetation canopies. And if you just use Google Scholar to search, there are a lot of published journal papers to address the similar issue. You will say, why do I care? Because maybe you do not care. And a lot of people, they're trying to use remote sensing to make people's life better. They're using remote sensing to monitor the growing of crops. They're trying to track the health of different species in this world. And in order to accurately and effectively do that, they need to know how EMR is transmitted, is reflected within vegetation community. Okay, if there is a vegetation community with grass, bush, and maybe some small short not very high trees and big very high trees, the transmitting and reflectance of EMR could be very complex. Okay, people need to know what is going on right there. So this is called multiple scattering. Okay, I'm not going to go even deeper, but you should know that vegetation remote sensing, okay, can be very quantitative, can be very complex when we're talking about the transmittance and reflectance of light energy. Okay. Okay, I will just stop here, and in the next video, I will start introducing the temporal characteristics of vegetation. Okay, I will just stop here and thank you.